Trying to let my glasses defog. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. This is the November 10, 2021 meeting of the Assembly Reapportionment Committee. Madam Clerk, would you please take the roll?
Mr. Constant?
Here.
Mr. Peterson?
Present.
Ms. Kennedy?
Here.
Ms. Quinn Davidson?
Here.
And for Assembly members not on the committee, Ms. Allard?
Here.
Mr. Dunbar? Ms. LaFrance? Mr. Perez-Verdia?
Here.
Mr. Rivera? Mr. Weddleton? And Ms. Zalatel? Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you very much, everybody. If you look at the agenda, we have a few items on the agenda. We have budget update, state final plan adoption, and then draft resolution declaring malapportionment, then a couple of items in ongoing business, draft published timeline, and communications plan. So we'll start with the budget update that I did not give last time because it kind of slipped my mind. We ran out of time. We, as a body, appropriated $100,000. There is a need for more funding if we intend to allow public members to draw their own maps using a similar system to what the state had done. Without us making that investment, we will receive any maps that come to us that meet the rules and requirements of our maps for consideration. But the question, of course, of whether or not we can afford to fund the actual tool by which members of the public can make their own maps is a bit outstanding, only because we only had 100,000 in our budget, and it appears that it's going to be approximately another $70,000 to allow that mapping process to proceed. There is interest from the public in doing that, but we'll be continuing to have that conversation. Are there any questions from members about that? I'm not hearing any questions from members, so we will move on to, oh, go ahead. Someone?
Mr. Constant, I was just wondering, do you want us to weigh in on that, or how do we seek resolution? You're kind of working through that.
So, yeah, this is a possibility of a budget amendment coming forward for next year because we can do it in the budget by amendment going forward. It could also be something that we contemplate early in the year. So, yeah, I guess we can have that discussion right now. Do we want to fund that? I think we have the contractor RDI on board that can help talk through the costs. And yeah, we can have that discussion right now.
And we don't have to. I was just wondering if you were looking for feedback from us. I mean, I guess a member of the committee could bring that amendment if they wanted to as well. But yeah, whatever you think.
So I think the red meat for today's conversation isn't so much that part of the budget. I just have it there because I wanted to make sure we got that report, and we can move that into the ongoing business section for the next meeting. And we can have that talk at one of our meetings before the budget's finalized on the 23rd or after. But really, I think the meat of today's conversation is the fact that today the state finalized their plan and that we have a draft resolution to discuss. I see Ms. Kennedy is in the queue.
Thanks. Yeah, I just kind of wanted to weigh in that, yeah, I'd like to have that conversation and hear about some of the costs. So if you want to, do that later at a different meeting, that's fine. But I think we probably should have the full conversation about it. Thanks.
So why don't we table that to the next meeting? Mandy, would you keep that in that new business section for us? And we'll make sure that's a top line conversation for the next one. But since today the state finalized their plans and we have a draft, I think that's the better use of today, because that's the action I think members of the public are waiting for. If there's no disagreement, we'll move on to that. As you are all probably now aware, the state did finalize their draft plan. Today is no longer draft, it's final. And one of the things that occurs today because of that is Proposition 12 from last year's ballot is now officially in effect. We have an assembly of 12 members. We are malapportioned. We need to get to the point where the 12th member is elected. We also have the data from the state, which will provide for us the exact numbers of our districts that need to be for our targets and where we stand as we are now. And so, Dennis, are you here?
Yes, sir, I am.
Are you prepared to have just a brief conversation about the state final plan at all?
Not in great detail, no. But you are correct. The main point is it does trigger your timelines. That's the main takeaway at this
So
point.
essentially, from today, 60 days to make the declaration if we want to take that kind of time. But I don't think we need to. Okay, so then I think then let's move into, and are there questions on the state final plan adoption?
Yeah, could I ask a question, Mr. Constant?
Please go ahead, Mr. Davidson.
I was just wondering, I think I've asked this before, but I just want confirmation either from Dennis or Mr. Gates or whoever. But when we declare ourselves malapportioned, that in general just means one or more districts is. Like, it's not a statement on every single district and where it is and how many. We don't have to do all that math. We just know that at least one district, the downtown district, is malapportioned by virtue of Prop 12, right?
Through the, Mr. Chairman, do you want me to answer that or?
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Wheeler.
So, yes, through the chair, thank you for the question. If you look at the attachment we just submitted for this agenda meeting, you can see a deviation table that we've created based on your current districts. And you could assess now that given Prop 12 and its implications, that you could make the statement that all the districts are malapportioned, but clearly District 1 is without a doubt because of Prop 12. So either way you slice it, you do need to work on modifying the boundaries to accommodate that new assembly member and the expansion of District 1. How you do that is what you're going to take the time to figure out.
And remind me the percentage that says you're malapportioned in each district is over 10? Or there's a range prior to that that's not dispositive?
There's a presumption, if you will, that
Yeah,
if you're under, yeah, correct.
Yeah, okay. Great. So yeah, 3 of the 4 of the 6 districts are definitely presumed to be, and then the others could be as well. But when we make a statement like through an AM through an AR, when we say we have determined ourselves to be malapportioned, it means some or all districts are malapportioned, and we should start that process in general for all the districts.
That is certainly one way to do it, yes.
Wait, are there other ways? Sorry, I'm just trying to understand. Are there other ways to do it, Mr. Wheeler? Am I mischaracterizing what our sort of steps are?
I think the point is you have to select at least one factual basis for declaring yourself malapportioned. So if you wanted to simply take District 1 and say it is the driver, that's certainly true. If you wanted to take the drivers of District 5 and 6, for example, you could do that as well. I don't think there's a wrong way to do it. In that regard, if you want to put them together, you can. I think the resolution just sort of talks generally about the statistics.
Yeah, I just want to make sure when we say we're malapportioned, we're not. I just don't know a lot of this information yet, so I want to be comfortable saying there's something that needs to be fixed. I don't know what. Maybe I'm not communicating well.
I'm going to jump in quickly, and if you look at the deviation table there, and you look at the column of 2020, and then the column next to it of target, the goal is, I believe one of the goals is to have a fair and equitable system where most districts are the same. That's the one person, one vote argument. And then there's the second part of that, which is contiguous and all of those other constitutional rules that we are I would gather, aiming to have a equitable distribution of those districts. And if you look back at the 2010 census numbers, all of the districts were within a tight range of each other. That's the column listed at 2010. And so I believe, and I mean, I could be wrong here, but our goal is to get all of those districts to be within a standard deviation of whatever we set as our target.
Got it. And so you're saying, Mr. Constant, they really are all malapportioned because they should be closer to zero.
And, you know, from a technical legal perspective, I would maybe lean on Mr. Gates for an answer to that part. But yes, from an equitability and fairness and equal apportionment, we should be aiming to get those as close as possible while respecting compact and contiguous and all those other variables that are essential.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I'm just trying to make sure I'm using the right words in the resolution. We're using the right words. So looks like Mr. Gates is trying to get into.
Yeah, please, Mr. Gates.
Yes, thank you. And I mean, I agree with everything Mr. Wheeler, Mr. Constant have said. I guess, Mrs. Quinn-Davidson, the thing you're looking for maybe is, and the way I sort of view this, is malapportionment is a determination for the municipality as a whole and our election districts as a whole. And then if we're talking about individual election districts, like Mr. Constant was saying, we've got a target population. If one district's deviation is way off, you might be, I guess, to use some terminology when we're talking about it. For example, say, oh, District 1 is now way off the target. It's the most deviated district after the Prop 12 becoming in effect. And as a result, the whole municipality is malapportioned. And then in the malapportionment process, you know, maybe in some scenarios, it might be that all you need to do is move one of the common boundaries between two districts a little bit, and then we're fine. You know, and that's not the case here this year, obviously. But, you know, it could be that simple where you don't really disturb other districts very much, but you have to adjust two of them a lot. But that's not the scenario we have in front of us, I don't think. But just the way I view malapportionment is it's a term that we use to describe our election district boundaries as a whole. And that's based on this district-by-district analysis. I hope that helps.
May I, Mr. Constant, really quick, and then I'll be quiet.
You don't have to be quiet. This is our forum.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
Okay, great. I was just going to say that's exactly what I was trying to get my head around. So that's perfect, Mr. Gates. That makes a ton of sense. And it just helps me understand how to frame it and how to use the right language as we move forward. So thank you.
Okay, any other questions on that previous topic? Okay, I am not hearing any, but as you can see from that table with the deviations, our goal, our work is to get towards those targets as close as we can. So obviously my district, District 1, has some growth and everyone else has some shrinking, and that's the plan going forward. So with that said, I think now it would be a good time to move toward the draft resolution. Excuse me. Will you pull that up, Andy? Okay, there we go. So Dennis, as the initial author, would you go ahead and walk us through this? Dean had an opportunity to make sure it's legally closer to what we need it to be. So it's kind of a presentation, if you will, by Mr. Wheeler, Mr. Gates, and then we can jump in.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is basically mimicking the resolution that was used in 2012 for the same purpose. So it walks through the legal structure for malapportionment, the declaration and timeline in the first paragraph. It then talks about how the census data comes in through the release of data in August. And then, of course, today's action by the redistricting board triggering the timelines. Then the next two paragraphs talk about how Prop 12 affects what we're going to be doing in the next few months and beyond regarding redistricting. With the data that we have before us now, we can, as demonstrated in the deviation table, demonstrate that there is a reason to declare malapportionment, and this resolution does that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Gates, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Thank you. Well, I would just add that in that highlighted portion in the middle, the redistricting map adopted November 5th and the proclamation November 10th. I mean, we probably will edit that to just say November 10th for both. So sorry if there was any confusion there. I was looking at the ARB's website and that's what they said. So anyways, we'll make that clearer and simpler. Otherwise, I think that Mr. Wheeler covered it perfectly. Thank you.
Any questions from the members before we pop over to the Assembly Memorandum draft that kind of puts some flesh onto this? Okay, I'm hearing none. Can we pull that up now, Mandy? All right, so before us now, we have a memorandum detailing more effectively in more broad language the actual purpose of the declaration, the resolution submitted to comply with our obligation to the voters, consistent with the constitutional mandate of one person, one vote. The charter states the assembly shall be reapportioned whenever it becomes malapportioned, and we need to review our election districts in relationship to the state final plan, which was published today. Census data demonstrates that we are malapportioned. And then goes down. And Dennis, can you brief us a little bit on what you'd like to see filled into the highlight section?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wrote this yesterday, of course, assuming the redistricting board would issue its proclamation, but not actually having that in hand. So I appreciate Dean's edits there for that purpose. And then as to the data, what we can do there, you have some choices. You can provide more or less detail as you think necessary. But what I intended to do there was update that, because that's older language, and I could simply describe the deviation for District 1, pointing out the other districts have their own changes, and then figure out what that deviation number is, which I think is on the map 90-something%. Put that in there. And then what I need to examine in that last sentence, whether we want to talk about a data error rate, we can. It's not required, but I was thinking those census blocks in the Northeast could still be dissected by current district boundaries. I just haven't had a chance to dive into that issue yet. Presuming we keep that sentence in there, then I would try to figure out what that error rate is.
Okay, and what that would do is slightly change the numbers in your table because some would be over here and others would be over there. Would that be the net effect?
There'd be some uncertainty as to how many people were in a split block on the left side versus the right side, if you want to imagine the split that way. So we have to make a guesstimate as to what that potential error rate looks like. It presumably it's going to be very small.
Of course. Okay, so now members, obviously this is the first time that you're seeing this, so I would fathom that the idea is probably best not to lay this on the table tonight and attempt to move it, but instead allow you an opportunity to chew on it for a little bit of time, and then us to intend to get it on an agenda coming up soon. Is that a fair assessment, members?
I would agree to that, Mr. Chair. I mentioned something about this during the Rules Committee, and I wasn't in any, I didn't mean to infer that I was in some great hurry to get stuff done. It's just, process that takes time. But the fact that we have this and you know, we can get it on the next agenda, that would be good. And then we should basically have it then within a month, but it would be approved. So I think that's good timing. Thanks.
Mr. Peterson, Ms. Quinn-Davidson, thoughts?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, we've got a couple meetings in December. We can get it on, and you know, we can get it taken care of before the end of the year. I don't think that we shouldn't be a problem. Thanks.
Sounds good to me too. So I read through it. It generally looked good. I think whenever we can get it on there without stressing everyone out over rushing sounds perfect.
So I then would argue not to do the second or third meeting or first or second meetings in December, but instead let's circulate a draft version that we get close to final. And then at our next meeting, which is, do you know what day our next meeting is, Mandy?
The next one is scheduled for
24th.
November 24th.
Oh, that's a bummer. Because I would like to get it on the agenda at the next regular meeting. Only because time is of the essence as we get this moving forward. In my district now, we are deeply malapportioned. We're missing a member as of today and every day that goes by. And so it would be my desire, if there's no real objection, that we figure out a way to get a finalized version, or at least a version close enough that we're comfortable introducing it for the meeting on the 23rd.
Mr. Constant, just an idea. I know we're trying not to move things around, so you all tell me if it's a bad idea, and I might already agree with you, but you know, we're currently scheduled right now at 9:30 a.m. the day before Thanksgiving, the night after an assembly meeting. We could move that meeting like to the day of the assembly meeting, for instance, that morning. Everyone gets a chance to say it's okay, and then lay it on the table, or maybe that's too last minute. I'm just trying to think of alternatives, because I kind of agree with you. It looks like it's basically final now. Close.
Dean, you were going to offer something?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Well, my thoughts is with a resolution like this one, I really would hope we can avoid laying this on the table. And quite honestly, I think looking at the drafts, it's very close to being ready. So to me, and I don't have our deadlines in front of us, but the normal schedule would be this Friday, the deadline for the regular agenda, next Friday for the addendum. So this Friday, I don't know if we want to gather some comments and feedback from the committee members. That might be tough, but before next Friday, it's very possible. And I don't know, if we don't have a meeting scheduled, we could do it by coordinating through me in my office. I don't know, that would be probably better to get this on the addendum along with the data and the attachments, so that the public has, you know, at least some time on the addendum to digest before you take this up and approve it. And again, this is not a public hearing item, so it's the public wouldn't have the chance to show up and give testimony. But if they got this ahead of time before the November 23rd meeting, they'd be able to contact the representatives, the whole assembly with their emailed comments and stuff. And I think that's a much more desirable public process. So I would encourage you to aim for getting this resolution finished. A lot of it, I think, though, I need to defer to Mr. Wheeler about the data and the numbers he wants to plug in, and make sure that they're confident or comfortable with doing that on that timeline.
So I would offer a middle road there then. If members are okay, I would like to ask the contractor and Dean to work towards an introductory version, a version that's so close they're comfortable with it. And then that we do consider having a meeting on the 23rd instead of on the 26th or the 25th. And so we have an opportunity as a group to final review of the item that was introduced. If we need any amendments before the meeting that night, fine, or we can forward a recommendation to the body that night as a committee. Is that a reasonable approach?
I like it, Mr. Constant.
Yeah, sounds good to me. And I think Dean's idea of doing it by email in advance is way better than my original one. So combo sounds good too. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm good to go with it.
Ms. Kennedy?
I guess my only question is, if we try to do this by email, we would be in violation of open meetings.
Right, and so that's where I think that the best path forward on the email side is individuals who may have concerns about the draft version can send them to Dean directly, and he can incorporate them, and then we can come back together as a group after the item is introduced on the agenda on the 19th. On the 23rd, before the meeting, we can do a final collaborative conversation in public in the open to forward our recommendation. So we aren't just doing it. There's no open meetings violations that way.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that works for me. Thanks.
Okay, so Dean, does that assignment make sense?
Yes.
So then do we want to meet on the 23rd? I just want to make sure we're all in agreement on that. And that would be in lieu of the 25th or the 24th, excuse me.
Sounds good to me.
Um,
I think we have more likelihood of the public participating too, just because it's not the day before Thanksgiving.
Absolutely. Okay. Pete?
one caveat for me.
Okay, go ahead, Dean.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt there.
Go ahead, Dean.
I won't be able to attend, but I will be watching my emails for any amendments, and our assistant Rebecca and our contractor will also be paying attention, so we should be on top of it if there's any changes out of the 23rd meeting.
Okay, so I'm going to propose a time of 9:30 on the 23rd. Any objections?
That works for me.
No, that's good. That works for me. Thanks.
Me too.
Okay, hearing no objections, then the plan, Mandy, is to change the day of the meeting that was scheduled for the 24th to the 23rd, which will give people more bandwidth for their Thanksgiving holiday and us an opportunity to review the item and make a recommendation before. And with that, I think then we're on to the next item on the agenda, which is the parking lot.
Mr. Constant, can I ask one more question about the
Please.
timing?
Yep.
So is our goal then, just so we know and we're paying attention and getting edits back to Dean and Mr. Wheeler, whoever's working on it. So are we trying to get something on the addendum on the 19th, and therefore we would work, throughout early next week to give edits, and then we sort of do a last pass on what we put on the addendum on the 23rd? Am I understanding correctly?
Yes, and if there are any recommended changes, amendments can be drafted through the committee or just a wholesale, we recommend approval.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. So then moving on the calendar, the published timeline, Mandy, I probably should have asked you to pull together a calendar, like a date list, and I didn't do that. Does anybody have that yet drafted? Okay, so I'm guessing I dropped that ball. I didn't ask anyone to do it, but I know we've scheduled a number of meetings out through the end of the year, and so I know that if we turn to Claire's one pager or fact sheet, could we open the fact sheet quickly on the published timeline?
Mr. Chairman, I think we're scheduled for December on the 9th and the 23rd or something.
Yeah, no, there are a number of meetings scheduled. There's the 23rd of November, I think, maybe the 9th. I don't know about the 23rd. I'm not going to be around that day. Someone else might need to chair that meeting if we do. But I will make sure we get that list finalized up as a draft and circulated very soon. I'm sorry that I didn't have that. So the fact sheet, though, Claire's drafted this up as a simple 1 or 2 pager, front and back 1 page. And it's in draft format. You're seeing it now. Basically gives a brief description of reapportionment. I believe this is the version that Mr. Gates has reviewed. Dean, did you have a chance to review this?
It has not been reviewed yet. I think Mr. Gates
I'm
and
sorry.
Ms. Brown.
I got to take a quick look. I didn't get to submit my edits to Claire. I will try to do that tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. So Claire, since you're on the phone, why don't I let you walk us through this?
Okay, so I will give the caveat that I think there are some edits. I'm not a lawyer. I just did my best to break it down into normal, regular person speak. And I based this off of Dean and Dennis's slideshow presentation that we saw last month. I don't know, what you see is what you get. I tried to make it as simple as possible for the public to understand, and then add a couple of the unique things that are happening in Anchorage this year with the 12th seat, as well as the U.S. Census districts that cross boundaries in some places and split houses into, or properties into. So yeah, it'd be great if you could review it, make sure I'm not missing anything important, make sure it makes sense to the public who don't have all the information that we do. And then I'm sure Mr. Gates and Ms. Brown have some technical and legal corrections that need to happen as well.
And as I see it now, we probably need to add just a little paragraph on Proposition 12. I didn't see that up there. We might even add that to before one of the boxes, you know, what in the box of your timelines. That was, you know, April 2020.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because that is one of the two very distinct reasons why we have the declaration before us now.
Yeah,
Wait,
I
see the.
I just wrote one sentence at the end of that, when is reapportionment needed, so I could figure out a way to highlight that a little better.
Yeah, and I'll help you get that language just right. So I guess the thing for members to consider is please read through this, know that there's a legal review happening, and if you have any thoughts on what we should include, your feedback is welcome before we finalize it and publish it for the world.
I have a thought already, if you don't mind.
Please.
On the boxes there, the light blue box on the right side, top right, it says if 10% plus total deviation equals, reapportionment is needed. I think there just needs to be some fine tuning on that one, you know, just maybe, I'm not sure the equal needs to be in there.
Okay. It's not helping the case.
Unless you are trying to say that the deviation actually needs to equal something, but anyway,
Right.
just kind of take a look at that and make a little more sense. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just trying to fit it into a small box, but I think there's the room to add the word then or something like that.
Well, like I said, I'm not sure the equal sign does anything in there.
Yeah,
Right.
agreed.
Okay.
Just remove it. Yeah.
Yeah, so those kind of feedbacks are really welcome. Love to have them if you see them. You know, this is a team effort, so looking forward to more. As again, Claire's caveat: A, she's not an attorney. B, this is a first stab, and your input is greatly welcome. So then back to the agenda. I think
Mr.
there's
Constant?
one. Oh yeah, please, Ms. Godet, it's nice to your hand up.
I was trying to be more polite instead of interrupting you, but I like Crystal's idea. I think or Miss Kennedy's idea. That's a good one. Just wanted to thank Claire for doing this. This is great. These are the kinds of things that we're so glad to have you here for, so we can communicate better with the public. Do you think, Mr. Constant, it'd be possible to have Claire or you work with Mr. Gates or Mr. Wheeler, and then once you have a final document that you like, recirculate to us so that we can give it a final once over? I would hate to make edits now and then have them changed, you know.
I think that's fabulous. And I think Dean actually is prepared already for his part. And
Okay.
It's just a matter of timing because everything happens all at once.
Great. Thank you.
Any other comments? Hearing none, let's go back to the agenda. Oh, wait, who's that? Someone? Okay.
You must have caught my slight hesitancy. I was just going to say that when we get to the communications plan, I was planning to release this chart with probably a press release and link to the website and that kind of stuff and have it all go out at once.
So can we move into that conversation, the communications plan? It's perfect.
I don't have one yet. I was waiting.
No problem.
This was my first step, and then I'm waiting for the timeline. So once I figure out exactly when public participation things will happen, or at least a rough idea. Then I'll come up with a plan. And some ideas I have are for maybe speaking at Make It Monday forum or other public meetings. I think maybe some have a talking points plan that assembly members can each take to the community councils and other meetings that you go to, and then probably an op-ed piece when we launch it, some press releases, and that sort of thing. I don't have it all put together in a document yet.
And so what I think the thing to do is let's put a timeline of the 23rd as the target for a press release and a release of information and a website if we can, Dennis, and because that's the day we'll be declaring malapportionment, or maybe it is, that's the day it will be on the agenda for the members to consider and approve if they do. And so that seems like a pretty good target date to have the comms plan drafted, circulated. And in fact, that too can be kind of a secondary item for the agenda on the 23rd to run the draft by the members, get input before anything happens that night.
Perfect. I have it on my schedule to put a lot of work into this next week once we get that timeline.
Wonderful. And Dennis, from you guys on the timeline, it might be helpful for you, Claire, and myself, and I'm not sure who else, to talk about what elements of the public outreach process you're going to be helping with, and that way we can make sure that it's all in alignment.
Sounds good, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any last comments on all of those things? All right, well, in your homework, you have read once more, twice more, and send notes to Dean, comments on the draft resolution and memorandum declaring malapportionment. The timeline I will get worked out. Claire and I will be drafting a communications plan with Dennis Wheeler and RDI, and we will be meeting on the 23rd to have a review of the final draft version of the declaration and a proposed communications plan. Anything I'm missing? Not hearing anything. Next on the agenda is audience.
This is
Oh, go ahead, Dean.
Oh, I'm sorry. Never mind.
Okay.
I think you had it right.
No problem. Then the next item on our agenda is audience participation. If you're a member of the public and like to be heard at this time, I guess before that, I should ask, are there members of the assembly not on the committee who would like to speak and be heard right now?
John's here just to listen while I work up some Black Friday ads. Figured I might as well listen in.
Glad to have you. So other members?
Yeah, Carson?
Okay, hold on, Carson, just 1 minute. Any other members of the assembly who wish to be heard who aren't on the committee? And Carson, we'll come to you in just 1 minute. Okay, not hearing anybody. Now, Mr. Young, please, you have 3 minutes.
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure if there's a couple questions that are informational and then one kind of broader, tougher one. One, this new seat, does it need to be going into effect in this next election, which would require that we get this reapportioning done before the next municipal election? Can I get an answer on that one real quick?
Go ahead.
We have to do this.
Yeah, go ahead and spend your time, and then afterwards I'll do my best to address your questions as a whole.
Okay, got you. So that's, I guess that's an informational question. I think it's, from what I'm hearing, the answer is yes. And that kind of creates sort of a dual problem I'm seeing. On the one hand, you want to take the time to make sure that this is done in a fair way that doesn't necessarily anybody who's currently running, who's, one of you guys, and make sure that it's, whoever's drafting these maps are neutral. But then there's also the problem that there's people who are running who deserve to know what their districts are going to look like. So how do we structure a timetable and a process that assures the public that it's fair without dragging it out so long that they don't know what districts they're going to be running in? Can you talk a little bit about that timetable?
Is that the end of your time?
Those are the questions that I have to ask.
Okay. Yeah, and I'll just very briefly answer, only because I know the answer to these questions. No, it's not possible for us to finalize the lines and have everything done by the April 2022 election, because the work would have to be done in less than a month for us to get the documents and materials to addressing and for the GIS teams to sort through and parse and validate all the addresses in the new districts in order to publish a notice of vacancy under the new districts by January 9th, which is the code-based timeline. And so there is no way we can achieve that timeline. That said, the question of the 12th member district is one that the committee will be sorting through as we work through this process. And so there won't be truncation of terms. At least I should restate that. The assembly has the option to consider truncation of terms or not. So that's a political question of the body. And truncation means ending terms. So we have the new boundaries, new districts, new elections. So, but in reality, the lawsuit's been was fought many years ago. If you go to the committee webpage, you can read the lawsuit that says the assembly has the authority to determine if it's going to truncate terms or not. And so because of that, we won't be meeting the deadline and people will be running on their current districts for the next round. That said, the 12th member is not a former seat. It wouldn't be a truncation. It would be a new seat based on new lines. And so there is going to be a conversation among the committee about when is the proper time to hold an election for that seat. So that'll be slightly different. And all of those questions will be sorted out through the process of this committee and its work.
Okay, so the districts as they are what they're going to be. You can say that for the next election?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's all I wanted to.
There's just not a chance for this work to conclude by early December. So, any other members of the public wish to be heard?
Yes.
Okay, please state
Hello?
your name for the record. Yep. Go ahead.
Hi, it's Rachel Colvard with TalkU.
Yep.
I'm glad to see this process moving forward, and I would just like to throw out there that if you go on census.gov, those maps should be available. And like, I know we're going to redraw lines potentially, but that's at least a good place to point people towards, since that's what the data is reflected in anyway. And then they can have a better sense, and maybe the other mapping tools will make a little bit more sense, having, a little bit of history behind where they're coming from. And other than that, I understand we want the same size of units and districts, and I also would like to impress upon you all to remember to be equitable about when we're drawing these lines, so that, if one place is like 20% one way or the other, that they're not getting disenfranchised because we drew a line around them, and now they have representation, but they're not truly represented. So I'm just throwing that out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Colvard. Any other members of the public wish to be heard? If *6 if you're on the phone. All right, I am not hearing anyone else. Any last comments from members of the committee? All right, Ms. Honest, we will get an agenda published for the 23rd, and everyone, thank you for your participation. We're adjourned.
Thanks.
Thank you.